Hi, my name is Jacquie Fiorentino. I'm a sports performance intern coach at Marquette University for the spring 2019 semester, and I'm very excited to be presenting my parkour annual plan to you today. So before we start, I want to go around and I want everyone to tell me what the first word that pops into your head when I say the word parkour. Matt, why don't you start for us?
Obstacles.
The office. I was gonna say that too. Just like jumping all over on objects.
Yeah, climbing.
Those were all words that I originally thought before I started looking into parkour and what you need to be able to perform the sport. But what I want you to do in the next slide when I play a video, I really want you to look at this sport as an art, as they're using their bodies to create an art form and not necessarily just the movement patterns that we're going to be looking at today.
Art of Motion title, but for this year, it goes to the man in those infamous blue shorts, Alexander Tidorenko.
So the history of parkour, it originated in France, and the founder is David Bell, but parkour actually began with his father, Raymond Bell. And when Raymond was a young child, he was sent to a military orphanage, and while he was there at night, he would sneak out and he would run through the military obstacle courses that they had there, as well as create his own to work on his own strength and endurance and ability to move through these challenges. And he used parkour as a way to kind of attack the hardships that he encountered in his life and as a mode of survival. And through seeing his father use parkour in that way, David eventually began training in parkour and really used that as a way of life, and eventually began the first parkour group. And that's kind of how the sport of parkour began. And I put quotations around sport because when he began and when that group began, they did it as more of a training mechanism and as a way of life. And it's not something that you did, it was something that you are. And as time has gone on, more people have recognized parkour as a sport and have started adopting it and been performing it more frequently. And so it actually in 2016, Britain was the first country to adopt parkour as a sport. And in 2017, the International Gymnastics Federation officially made it a discipline. And in 2018 was the first Parkour World Cup. And so what is parkour? So like I've been saying, it originated as an art and it was a state of mind. It was a way to overcome physical and mental obstacles that people encountered. And as more people have began to practice parkour, it has become adopted as a sport. And it, as I mentioned in the previous slide, through Raymond Bell, it was a training discipline using movements that developed from military obstacle courses. So right here we have all of the parkour organizations that have been developed, and so you see there are a lot of different countries that are now using parkour as a sport and a competition basis. So they have Australia, Syria, Uganda, Cuba, the United States, and we have the International Parkour Federation. So it's really taking off as a sport, and more people are wanting to do it and wanting to perform the sport. So there are more and more organizations being created. So the goals of parkour competitions. So there are 3 different parkour competitions that you can ultimately do. There's a speed competition, a creativity competition, and a freestyle competition. So the goal is ultimately in a speed competition, get from one point to the other as quickly as you can. In the creativity competitions, you want to be as creative with your movements as you possibly can, and freestyle is a combination of both. And in all these competitions, the judges are looking at 4 main criteria. You're looking at the difficulty, so how difficult are the movements that they're performing are. The execution, they're looking at whether or not they're performing these movements to the best of their abilities and as precise as they can. They're looking at versatility, so in parkour competitions, it's going to be a lot of obstacle courses, and these athletes aren't going to be exposed to them beforehand. So they're looking at how well do they adapt to these new situations that they're given without having any challenges. And then they're looking at flow. So are they stopping in between movements, or is their movement, their body patterns, the way that they're moving through these courses a very fluid moment? So all of these criteria are very essential in a parkour competition. So movement analysis. So as you saw in the video, it includes a lot of jumping, a lot of climbing, a lot of running, a lot of vaulting over obstacles. And so there are so many different movements that you have to train for in parkour, but ultimately they all flow together, and so you're really training for strength, speed, agility, flexibility, or mobility, and these are all things that we're going to be looking at going into our seasonal annual plan. And so injuries. So as you saw, there's a lot of jumping and landing, but there are obstacles that you can hit, so you're going to have a lot of sprains, strains, contusions, lacerations, abrasions, either from jumping from higher points or from hitting other objects. And stress fractures are actually very common in these sports because of the amount of micro trauma that especially their lower limbs are hitting as they're jumping from these higher points in competition. And especially like ACL tears are very common in the knee because of the amount of cutting that they're doing and the amount of moving that they're doing. So as we're training, we're really training to strengthen these parts of their bodies to kind of try and avoid these. So parkour season. So during our season, we're going to go to California, Nevada, Washington, Colorado, Texas, New York, Spain, France, Poland, Russia, and our final goal, which is going to be the World Championship, is going to be in Tokyo, Japan. So that's where we're looking at going into our like our seasonal plan. So our annual plan, so our off season is going to start July of 2019 and go until October of 2019. And our main biomotor focus is going to be strength. And then we're going to go into our preseason, and it's going to be November of 2019 till April of 2020. And then our in-season will be May of 2020 till July of 2020. So our initial testing, so we're going to do maximum push-up, maximum chin-up, vertical testing on a just jump mat, beat test, and we are going to time them for their all-out 60-meter and 100-meter sprint. And so the reason that we're not doing like a squat test or a bench press is because all of these athletes, we are going to train outside of a weight room because not all of them are going to have access to a weight room. So we want to adapt their training to not only the atmosphere that they're going to be competing in, but so that it's accessible to all of our athletes. So our off season, like I said, will be from July of 2019 until October of 2019, and we're going to focus on strength. Our frequency is going to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for most weeks. And as you can see, our load is going to increase as the month increases, and our volume is going to decrease. So the amount of reps they're going to do is going to decrease. And when I say their load is going to increase, I'm not saying their weight. I'm saying the difficulty of the exercises that they will be performing is going to increase. So if they're doing a push-up, they might start with a normal push-up in July, but by October they might be doing a push-up with a clap and then into a burpee. So we're really going to be increasing their difficulty. And then in their preseason, which is November of 2019 to May of 2020, we are going to have a moderate strength program. So we're still going to make sure that they are really keeping a good strength program, but we're really going to be pushing their speed. So as you can see from the testing that we're going to be doing, they are going to be doing start with 55 to 65% of their sprint time, and by the end of it be at 100%. And so again, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they'll be training, and each day is gonna focus on something different for sprinting. So on Monday, we'll typically focus on sprinting technique. Wednesdays will be mainly maximal acceleration work, and Fridays will be a lot of top speed work. So we're really gonna be pushing the speed, and that's because they're going to use their speed in competition a lot. So they're going to use their speed to gain momentum, to do flips off of buildings, off of any other obstacle, and they're going to use it to get from one point of the course to another point. So speed is essential as well as strength, but you also want to make sure that they are not gaining too much muscle mass, so you want to have a very lean muscle mass. And then going into our in-season competition, we'll be doing May of 2020 till July of 2020. And so we're going to have very light strength and speed, and we're really going to be incorporating agility and mobility. And the reason that we're doing this is because when they travel, their sleep schedule, their nutrition is going to be altered. And we really don't want to push our athletes to be working as hard as they can while they're enduring the time differences and their sleep patterns changing. So we still want to make sure that we're maintaining some strength, some speed, but agility and mobility is what we're really going to focus on, which will be very good for them. And because, like I said, they're going to be traveling a lot, their frequency per week of training will be Tuesdays and Thursdays mainly, so it gives them time to adjust to sleeping, and it gives them time to rest in between and before a competition. Are there any questions?
What are your thoughts on calisthenic parks? Are you familiar with that? Like,
I'm not.
So basically, like around recreational parks, they have like, you know, pull-up bars, other different forms of just body weight, like to help supplement your body weight exercises. One thing you said was that, which I was very surprised about, was you're not going to be bringing them into a gym. So what are your thoughts about keeping them together, like the team almost at like a calisthenic park, or like somewhere along the lines of that?
Parks are usually very good for training for parkour because they are going to incorporate a lot of the same obstacles that they'll see in a competition. So they'll have a lot of bars to swing from, they'll have a lot of benches and platforms to jump off on. So that's a very good place to train for parkour and to get people to train for parkour, because like I said, there might be a gym, but because a lot of the competitions that they'll encounter will be outside, going to somewhere like a park is going to be a really good atmosphere for them to work in, because it'll help them familiarize themselves with the atmosphere as well as get some good training in. So that would be really good. Keely?
Is parkour like always one-on-one, or is it like a team sport?
It is one-on-one. So a lot of people will enter individually. I haven't heard of any teams yet, and I think it's just because everyone has their own style. Everyone's going to train differently, and so a lot of people that enter these competitions will enter individually.
When you were talking about the nutrition, would you recommend that your athletes also supplement with creatine, because it looks like there's going to be a lot of short bursts in exercises? So.
That would definitely be something that athletes could look into and possibly take. I haven't done a lot of research on that, so I don't know if I would recommend that for athletes, but it may just depend based on different athletes. And that's why we do a lot of the initial testing, is to see where their baseline is and constantly see how their performance is being affected. If we see that there's not really a change, maybe something like a creatine supplement might help them, especially in those explosive dynamic movements that they're doing all throughout a competition.